So this question says solve this quadratic equation. We know it's a quadratic, it's got single variable with power 2 as the highest power, and we recognise it equals 0, and it says give your solution to 3 significant figures. So it's not going to be a factorising type approach to this one, because 3 significant figures imply the answers will be decimals, and therefore we're going to have to use the formula or completing the square. This one, it'll probably be easier to use the formula, because completing the square isn't easy when you've not got a single x squared. We've got 3x squared. It can be done, but a little bit more complex. So we'll do the formula. Now at the front of the exam paper they tell you the formula, so it's always useful to write it down. So to find the value of x, you do negative b plus or minus the square root of the b value squared plus, sorry, not plus, what am I doing? It's take away 4ac all over 2a, where, and it's important you recognise that it's about solving the quadratic when it equals 0. So it's really important, because sometimes the examiners don't give you equals 0 here. They might say something like 3x squared take away 5x equals 1, and you've got to realise to move the 1 on the other side to leave yourself with 0 here. We need 0 on the right hand side, so need 0 here to use that. It's really important. And again, key ideas. We've got to remember that that is negative b. Okay, it's not minus b, it's negative b. This is minus, and this is minus, but this is negative. So it's really important in your calculators that you use the correct symbols or the correct keys. So that's the general quadratic. And if we compare it to what they've given us 3x squared, take away 5x, take away 1 equals 0. So we can see that the a value would be 3. The b value, got to be careful here, it's going to be negative 5. So the b value is going to be negative 5, and the c value is going to be negative 1. So we've got those values written out, so now we can put them into the formula. So we've got negative brackets when you're substituting for variables, so negative 5. We're going to do the plus version first, because we don't have a key on a calculator to do plus or minus in one go. So the plus version first. So we're going to add on the square root of, now it says the b squared value, so b was worth negative 5. As it's in negative, it's important you put it inside a bracket, because most calculators won't work properly unless you do. So negative 5 squared, we're then taking away, now that is a minus, that's a negative, got to be careful. So always keep reminding yourself that's negative, negative, negative. So it's really important to use the right key on your calculator. And we're taking away 4 times the a value, which was 3, times, again, because it's a negative, put it in a bracket to substitute your calculator correctly. And again, you've got to remember that that's a negative. Okay, it's negative 1. And then it's all over the 2 times the a value, which is 2 times 3. Now, most modern calculators, you've got a nice fraction key to use for this. I don't happen to have one of those in doing this, so I'm going to use a slightly older calculator. But it's still got a negative key to demonstrate what's going on. So I'm going to do the top line first, and the top line is, there's my negative key. So the top line is going to be negative bracket negative 5, close bracket, plus, now square root. Now on this calculator I have to put a bracket here to make sure that I'm going to do the whole of the calculation, the whole of this in one square root. So it's a bracket, but then I need to put another bracket because I want a negative 5 squared. So squared, and then take away 4 times 3 times bracket negative 1, close bracket, and then I close the bracket at the end because I want to make sure I've done all my square roots and everything in the right place. And then I'm dividing by 2 times 3, which is 6, so I'm dividing by 6. So that gave me an answer on my calculator of 1.85. Because the question wanted 3 significant figures, then it's 1.85. So that's one of my values. I then have to go through and work out the takeaway part. So I'm literally going to go back into my calculator. Now most modern calculators you can use the arrow keys, and that allows you to go back in. On this one it doesn't, unfortunately, but usually you'll be able to go back in and then just change it. So in this one I'm going to have to write all of this again, but then instead of putting a plus there, I'm going to put a takeaway. So it was negative bracket negative 5, close bracket, but now take away square root, bracket because I need to do all of it. So again, another bracket to put the negative in. So -5, closed and squared. Take away at this stage 4 times 3 times putting a negative in, so put it in a bracket. -1, close bracket, close the bracket for the end of the calculation, and then divide that answer by 6. So my other answer is or x equals negative 0. Write that neater. So negative 0.18. It wanted 3 significant figures, so 0.180. Now at this stage, too many of you guys will just think, okay, that's fine, done it, let's move on. But you must check. The whole point of doing all this is to find an answer that will make this equation give an answer of 0 here. So we must go through the check to remind us that we found these solutions, so we need to check they work. If you check one of them, then it gives you confidence. You should check both technically. So let's have a look. The check would be, for this one, it would be 3 times 1.85 squared, take away 5 times 1.85, take away 1, and we'd expect the answer to be close to 0. Not exactly 0 because we've rounded our x values. So we've got 3 times 1.85 squared, take away 5 times 1.85, take away 1. So we ended up with an answer of 0.0175, close enough to 0, so our check worked. So we can be happy that all our work should have paid off with full marks. So again, when you're solving the quadratic equations on a calculator paper to 3 significant figures, the formula is usually the best way to do it. I say completing the square will work, but not so easy when you've got 3x squared. And you compare the original quadratic equal to 0. Again, remember, always make quadratics equal to 0 when you want to solve them on a calculator paper. And we go through the process of putting in the values that we found for A, B and C, being really careful that where we've got negatives we use the proper negative key on the calculator, and we put brackets around negative numbers in our calculators because the calculators unfortunately have a fault in them that when you square a negative it doesn't work properly unless they're in a bracket. So that's how you can solve quadratic equations, guys. Not too bad, just practice.